Hello, I'm pleased to welcome you to our presentation. The title of our conversation today is In Order to Grow, We Must Learn to Share, Catholic School Leaders and Shared Education. I'm Dr. Victoria Graff from Loyola Marymount University, and I'm pleased to have my colleagues here join me. I'm going to ask Mr. Billups to introduce himself, and then also Mr. Early to introduce himself. And then we'll get started with our conversation.
My name is Richard Billups. I am currently serving as the Vice Principal of the Upper School at American Martyrs School in Manhattan Beach. And over the course of our opportunities to visit Northern Ireland, I was also serving as Principal of St. Bernard High School in Playa del Rey.
Hi, I'm Darren Early. I'm the Director of Loyola Marymount University Family of Schools, which is a partnership with Catholic schools, public schools, and charter schools. I actually had a special trip to Northern Ireland. I did not go with a contingent, but I was able to see and experience the same things and learn more about shared education in the process.
So I think we have a unique opportunity here with this conversation because while we are representing Catholic education, we're also going to explore how we can collaborate with our public school colleagues as well. We have a unique opportunity with Loyola Marymount University and the Family of Schools, which, as Mr. Early was saying, includes Catholic schools, public schools, and charter schools. So I think this is a unique conversation that we're going to have to share with you as school leaders. So Mr. Billups, could you just introduce a little bit in terms of the challenge for Catholic schools, since often they are seeing themselves as independent and on their own, and how they might be able to benefit from working with other schools?
Absolutely. One of the exciting things we saw on this trip to Northern Ireland is how schools of extremely different backgrounds and different resources are able to come together and find things, classes, coursework, resources, even educators, and share them amongst each other to improve both programs at both schools. Catholic schools so often work as an independent silo, and they don't recognize the opportunities that are available to them locally in their neighborhood, a little bit larger in a region or a city within a large archdiocese like we have here in Los Angeles, or even the opportunity to work regionally and across the country. And that's what makes this opportunity to share this information with NCEA unique. When we were in Northern Ireland, we realized the schools did an amazing job of finding programs that a small group of people or a small group of teachers were interested in providing to a school that might not be fiscally viable. And that's the number one issue that Catholic schools face. We're tuition based. And depending on where your school is located, you may or may not have the resources to have that program. But combining with a school close by where students can work together, suddenly that program is viable if you're able to share resources, whether it's fiscal or the teacher themselves can jump on a Zoom. That's one thing we've learned over the last couple of years due to the COVID pandemic. And we're doing it right now. We're able to utilize Zoom to bring people together. And it's just a great opportunity we really felt that we saw throughout Northern Ireland. And with the history of Northern Ireland and the troubles and political and religious differences, they're able to cross that over and learn from each other and kind of cross over some of those cultural and religious differences. Certainly we can do that within a system of the Archdiocese or the system of Catholic schools. And when you're able to partner with a university like we have, then those resources are extended even more. And being able to work with Dr. Early and the Family of Schools, we're able to start to see charter schools and public schools come together with Catholic schools and share some of our resources and brainstorm. And the conversation itself is massive and it's so inspiring. And we've had an opportunity to go back and have these Zoom sessions with the educators we met in Northern Ireland. And it's crazy to see that we're facing struggles here in LA that they're facing there in Belfast and Derry and Londonderry as well. And just being able to come together and recognize, hey, we're in this together. And there's so much that we can learn from each other to make it viable and successful at different schools.
So this was a unique opportunity to be able to take principals from the LA Archdiocese over to Northern Ireland, and we were guests of Queen's University Belfast. And Queen's University Belfast has been doing research in this notion of what is shared education. Mr. Billups referred a bit to the troubles and some of the conflict that Northern Ireland has experienced actually over 30 years, where you have different communities that live essentially in a small area. But if, for example, if you have a village in Northern Ireland, you may have a Protestant school at one end and a Catholic school at the other end, and yet the two will never interact with each other. And it's a matter of identity for them. And so Queen's University with Professor Tony Gallagher and Dr. Gavin Duffy were able to conduct research as to how to bring these schools together, to find a common purpose for these schools. So schools where they would have young people who would never talk to the young people at the other schools, the teachers would never collaborate, but they were able over time to actually be able to demonstrate that if you can bring pupils together, you can bring teachers together, and even these pupils were wearing different uniforms, which really kind of set them apart. But if they came together in an academic setting where they would be studying math together or history together or other topics and so forth, and these would be at the primary level as well as at the high school level. But this research that has come out of Queen's University became very intriguing to me as an educator. And so I was able to bring this opportunity to the LA Catholic principals to say, would you like to come and actually see where there could be some lessons learned from the visits to the various schools? It's not perfect. It's not identical to what we find in Los Angeles, but I think there's enough commonalities and lessons learned that could be brought back. And so to try and take those lessons forward. So Dr. Early, if you could just talk to us a little bit about the family of schools and how the work that you were able to observe in Northern Ireland has impacted some of the work that you're doing, where you have three different sectors of education, Catholic, charter, and traditional public, who oftentimes see themselves in competition with each other, but now hopefully will work in collaboration.
All right, so yeah, thank you, Dr. Graff. One of the things that I want to take a step back. One of the things that is really exciting for me is LMU, we've had several programs along the way, Loyola Marymount University, and the name of one of the programs that we've done with different teachers and different school partners has been Better Together. That's been the conversation, and that has served as a mantra for us within the family of schools work, because we have traditional public schools, we have charter schools, we have parochial schools, specifically archdiocesan parochial schools. And so with these partnerships, what we've realized is that our goal is to get our faculty and our staff to think and to understand that we are better together. There's an issue that we have here in California where we have co-location. So we may have, on one site, we may have 4 different schools. And so we'll have a traditional public high school, 2 charter schools, and then another traditional public middle school on one side. And then right around the corner, literally, we have a comprehensive Catholic school, and right across the street, we have a comprehensive Catholic, K-8 school. So we're all together, but we have to realize that we're better together. We have to realize that there are opportunities for us to collaborate. One of the things that stands in my mind is that Rick, as principal of St. Bernard's High School, just this year, he opened up his school for our charter school. And so it was funny because I was at 2 graduations kind of interacting with students within the same week, but on the same campus, right? And so, but that's what we desire to do. That's the best case scenario, but it doesn't always look like that. One of the challenges that we faced is just this, is that because there is a limited number of students, and we know that, and because resources, as Rick said, are sometimes limited, and everybody's kind of like lions in a cage battling for a single piece of meat, we don't see ourselves as partners in the work. And the work, and within the family of schools, we've tried to get our principals to see themselves as partners in the work. We sponsored peer observation symposiums, co-location symposiums. We try to fund meetings where we can bring our school leaders together so they can just talk about common challenges. And this is the wild part. Recently, we had a conversation with some of our principals in LA, and also some principals in Northern Ireland. And as Rick was sharing earlier, common challenges. They, concerned about the COVID crisis, concerned about their ability to help their teachers and their staff kind of navigate these spaces. And when we realize that we're in the same boat together, I think Dr. King said it, that we're either going to live together as family, or we're going to perish together as fools. And that's the conversation that we have in the family of schools, that how do we get schools to work together? The other part that I think is very interesting is that often we have teachers who are very much connected, or students who are connected to other students in the space. And so, or have similar programmatic concerns or similar experiences. And so it's not just about how we can connect our leaders, but it's also how do we connect our teachers?
Mhm.
And then how do we connect our students? One of the things that's very interesting that I learned in Northern Ireland, and this was great, because the way shared education works in Northern Ireland, it's not about the academics initially. Initially, the schools have said these two students live on the same street, metaphorically speaking, they live on the same street, but they never come together. Our goal is, how do we just bring them together around their common humanity? And once they come together around their common humanity, then they realize that they have shared interests. And then from those shared interests, they say, well, we can sit in the class and we can learn history together. We can sit in the class and we can learn math together. And we can talk about our different experiences. It was amazing to me, because I always think as an athlete, sports is being the unifier, right?
Yep.
But when I realized that the students in Northern Ireland were literally in the Catholic schools and the Protestant schools, they played different sports.
Yeah.
They didn't even come together around the
Yeah.
athletics. I was like, wow. And so it gave me hope, and it inspired me to say that they're overcoming challenges that we can't even imagine.
Mhm.
And so it gives us no excuse and no reason why not to push forward to find that space where we can be better together in the family schools.
And I think that's a perfect, focus on what our topic is here, with how leadership is so involved and so important in making this successful. And the fact of the matter is, it comes down to Dr. Duffy and Professor Gallagher and the leadership that they took on.
Right.
And then they went to the leaders of these schools. And when you have passionate leadership, it will trickle down. And we saw that in Northern Ireland. And we've seen it with the principals who traveled to Northern Ireland here in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
The passion that they bring to their schools, the passion that they brought to this trip to study for a year before going, the commitment they made to coming together after that trip to work together and learn about inclusion in Northern Ireland, learn
Can I
about
add
shared
something, Rick?
education. Yeah, please.
One thing I want to add to that is that, and it just briefly, is leadership matters. Leadership true leadership is underrated, just like great coaching, but you also need a convener. And this is not just a pat on the back, but I always say this about Dr. Graff, is that these conversations don't occur unless somebody says, okay, this is happening over there, this is happening over here, how do we bring them together? And so you need somebody on the ground or in the air, it doesn't matter, to serve as a convener to get those leaders together, to really have them working together.
Absolutely. And the opportunity to present to NCA is kind of a culmination of that. This opportunity to share this message and this passion that a group of 12 or 13 of us in Los Angeles have brought together, that Dr. Early has brought to his family of schools and LMU's partnership, and what we've seen in Northern Ireland, we really believe that this is something that can happen not only nationally, but that every archdiocese should be able to look in the mirror and say, wait a minute, this is silly. Why am I not sharing these beautiful resources that I have here at American Martyrs with the public school down the road, or the Catholic school on the other side of Los Angeles? Because I can jump on a Zoom with a classroom of kids and have them see some of the things that we're working on here. And we have so many Catholic schools that are just a bridge. It's just right down the road. You've got 3 or 4 Catholic schools in the city of Los Angeles, and they're not communicating. They're not sharing any resources. And we really believe that the messaging and the lessons we learned there come back to leadership. And if we can get leaders together to have these conversations, and we're going to share some reflection questions at the end of this presentation, if we start sharing those questions and those desires and those goals locally, archdiocesan-wide, regionally, statewide, nationally, I think the partnerships that can develop will really lead to some real beneficial opportunities for Catholic education across our country.
I think it's very, very exciting. But this is, how can I say this? it's going to take some time. It's not something that's going to happen, overnight. This is a culture shift, when we're talking about
Yes, it is.
collaboration. And, you think about a Catholic school system, Archdiocesan system, and you think about Los Angeles Unified School District as a system.
Right.
And then you've got the charter schools in there in terms of these various sectors. So one thing I just wanted to mention in terms of sort of the time that it took in Northern Ireland to bring these schools together. Again, it did not happen overnight. And there was suspicion, from the various communities as to, are you taking away my identity? And, within the Catholic schools, Catholic identity is obviously very significant. And so I think to kind of anticipate where some of the resistance, if you will, or some of the hesitancy might be. And I know in Northern Ireland, some of the parents were a little suspicious, a little hesitant about mixing, if you will, across community and so forth. And so I just wonder, as you're anticipating both within the family of schools and also in the network that you're thinking of, how can we, leadership is definitely critical, but the parents are going to want to know, in terms of Catholic identity, what does this mean actually? I don't know, Mr. Phillips, if that's something that you can, off the top of your head, be able to address. I don't think that was part of our conversation, but I think it's something that we need to
Great
anticipate.
question.
Yeah, and
Great
I
question.
think from a truly Catholic education perspective, one of the missions of Catholic education is evangelization. And this would be an opportunity to share our traditions, to share our focus, to share our belief. And if we're sharing that with public school or charter school students, they may be inspired by some of the goals that we have. But likewise, as Dr. Early shared with the experience in Northern Ireland, you see that it may not be that religion is what's going to bring us together. It could be some other shared interest. And you recognize that for some people who see religion as a divisive meaning, Catholics we're supposed to be focused on the concept of universal. It's one love, it's one
Yes,
God, and it's about coming together to focus on those core beliefs. And in a sense, that's evangelical as well, that opportunity to bring people together where division has occurred previously, and it's public versus private, Catholic versus charter. Take those names out and find that common ground that we've been able to see in other places and focus on that, and the opportunity to not use athletics as that bond, but to find a performing arts program.
Yes.
It's like, wow, I love Sister Act.
Right.
This school has a great need. This all-girls school needs that male lead. Like, they have it. Let's build that
Let's bring it
together. Or just the opportunity, that interest to sing together, to act together,
Right.
and yet schools across the street aren't doing it. And why are you going to underutilize a facility on your campus because you don't have enough kids to fill it?
Right.
Let's reach out and find ways to use those facilities to bring those students together. And if it means that a couple extra students come into Catholic education, great.
Right.
If it means that we lose a couple of students, not so great. Catholic wise, we're struggling with enrollment across the country, but it's still about how are we going to build community? How are we going to build successful educational programs?
And Rick, I'm glad you talked about, what it actually means in terms of coming together and crossing those bridges, because one of the things I think that we have to be clear on in public schools is we have to understand what separation between state and church or church and state means and what it doesn't mean.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that you can't have conversations about God. It doesn't mean that you can't connect, a Catholic school and a public school. All it means is that you can't proselytize in a specific context. And so the door is open if we understand, what this looks like. Also, in terms of partnering across these sectors, what we find out is just this, like you said, it becomes a symbiotic relationship because these large systems, they can do things on economies of scale. And so they can get things, they can get more stuff, but the smaller Catholic schools are more nimble. And so they can turn on a dime. They can make a decision for a student-based program that maybe that public school can't make. And I know a lot of times when we're doing things with public schools, just simple things. A public school cannot spend their budget on a lunch. They cannot spend, a school student body money to feed folks, right? But in the Catholic school, that's a non-issue. So if we're collaborating collaboratively doing some things, and often I find ourselves even from LMU, if we're collaboratively doing some things, and we may want to have a workshop for teachers and families and students or whatever. We have the flexibility to say, hey, you know what? Let's funnel these dollars through this part, so that we can spend it this way. But at the same time, the Catholic school said, hey, we don't have enough money to buy these supplies, but if we buy a large amount of them, and then we funnel it through the larger system. So it's really a matter of being wise and being thoughtful in terms of how we partner, and in terms of why we partner. And the last thing I would say is just this, that at the end of the day, it's kind of like the no smoking zone in a restaurant. The smoke doesn't know where to stop and where to go, right? And the crazy part is just that a lot of these families are on the same block. They're coming from the same communities. They're playing, they're going to the ball field together. They have relationships, but what we do is we say, but your schools can't.
Yeah.
And that's just it's not practical, it's not effective. And we want to bridge that gap, because bridging that gap is where we have the conversations that break down those socioeconomic walls, those cultural walls, and then those ideological walls, and allow us to work together.
Wow, I think on that point, Dr. Early, thank you. That's a great transition. And as you can see, there's a lot to think about, a lot to kind of take away. And Mr. Phillips now is going to leave us with some reflection questions for you to consider. And then we'll talk about how you can get in touch with us at the end of this.
And we would love for these discussion topics to be shared out. And we would love to be able to have everybody that's viewing this presentation reach out to us and contact us so that we can put together a shared Google document. Again, Google, what a great way to be able to share ideas and communicate with each other across countries, across districts, across schools. But we really hope that you share some of these, because we're going to see that some of what your responses to these reflection questions are going to be shared with other people around the country, or possibly right down the street from you at another Catholic school that you haven't had a communication with. And so we want to help develop these partnerships locally, as well as get you thinking about who and how you might be able to reach out to folks. So one of the first questions that we want you to consider today is, what do you wish that you had, or that you have, or that you don't have, that somebody close by you does have, that you really wish that you could run that performing arts program as an after-school program, but you can't fund it, but you know that that Catholic school on the other side of town is running that? We just want you to kind of think about programs that you see at other schools that you don't have, that you wish you did. And just kind of come up with that wish list, specific though to programs or events or resources that you know other local schools have. That's the first thought. A second one, what are some small, very specific programs that you are aware of as a leader that a small group of students or staff really have an interest in, but you have not been able to move forward with it because of budget constraints? Be honest about it. Maybe go out and survey some of your students or staff. Find out what those little niche ideals or programs are. And then let's start to see if there aren't other programs and schools that are looking for similar things. Be honest about yourself with this next question. What restrictions are you aware of that would limit you from working with a neighborhood Catholic school? What are some of the challenges that you might think are in place with local Catholic schools? And then take it a step further. What restrictions or limits do you think are present with your local public or charter schools? Because as Dr. Early said, sometimes what you think is a restriction isn't actually a restriction.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, exactly. Put those things together and then be honest with yourself. Ask yourself this question, look in the mirror. Why aren't you partnering with other schools that are near you? What is keeping you from reaching out to a neighborhood school and asking to partner with them on a program? Be really honest about it. Mm-hmm. The answer could be something as simple as, didn't think of it. Or it could be, well, I can't afford to lose students to that school. That's valid. but be honest about those. And when you answer these questions, I want you to think about this pressure that we received from a principal in Northern Ireland, Mr. Michael Allen. We were sitting down in a conversation with him, his Protestant school. We were at the local Catholic school that he's partnered with, having lunch. And one of the questions that came up was about inclusion. And we all kind of nodded our heads. It's a challenge. We don't have the resources. We don't. And he looked us all dead in the eye before speaking and said, "How dare you? How dare you call yourselves Catholic and refuse students because you can't afford it or you can't find the resources?" Inclusion is a huge part of our Catholic system that needs to be revised, revamped, and addressed. Ask yourself that question. What is keeping me from being completely inclusive? And what partnerships can I develop with local schools so that inclusion does become a focus for us?
Well, thank you, Mr. Billups, and also thank you, Dr. Early. This has been a wonderful conversation with some of my wonderful colleagues and partners in collaboration. And so I hope that this has been a stimulating conversation for you, maybe presenting some ideas that you hadn't thought about before. I think Mr. Billups gave you some things to take away and to consider, but we want to be able to offer our services. If you would like to follow up with us at any point, I'm sure with this video, we'll be able to share our email contact information. I'm at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And then also Dr. Early as well as at the university. And then Mr. Billups is here at American Martyrs in Manhattan Beach, but we'll share our contact information. We look forward to having further conversations with any of you who are interested in possibly establishing a similar kind of partnership that Mr. Billups has talked about. And working to continue this work. We're going to be continuing to work with the group that went to Northern Ireland, as well as collaborating with the principals again in Northern Ireland, because we think we have, again, some shared interests and so forth, and we can learn so much from each other. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.